Have you ever heard of intersex? Some people actually refer to it as disorder of sex development, DSD. But professionals say it is not a condition, it is not a disorder, it is not a disease. It's simply people who are intersex. In fact, recently there was a spotlight on Zambia on this topic because of an interview on the BBC. Globally, 2% of the population is said to have intersex traits. So what is it? Well, you and me both are going to learn together as we speak to somebody who's been living this every day from the day they were born. Welcome to the conversation, Mpatso Sakala.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come on our podcast. I know you could be doing so many other things with the work that you do in the community about intersex and your career as a musician in the past. And so we are extremely pleased that you were able to come today. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Now, let's start from the very, very beginning. Many people have heard the term intersex. What does that mean?
Okay, so I love to simplify it because sometimes we go all out with a lot of big words, which in the process we lose people. So first things first, when we talk about intersex, we are actually referring to a person who was born with sex characteristics which do not fit the typical definition of how we understand as someone being born male or being born female in terms of the biological makeup. And in simpler terms, I love to actually ask people to reflect to say, if you are talking about someone being male, what is it biologically that makes you say that this one was biologically born male? When you look at a female, what is it? What are the characteristics which will actually tell you that this one was biologically born female? So when you look at intersex, intersex finds itself as a middle sex. So what am I saying? I'm saying that intersex people are born with a mix of secondary traits from both male and female.
There's no clear cut.
There's no clear cut. So it's mostly, we say that they are born in between.
Okay. Now, maybe if we can go to the beginning. Where were you born? When were you born?
So for me, I was actually born in Lusaka and raised in Lusaka.
When was this?
I was born in 1986.
1986, okay.
Yes.
And you were raised in Lusaka. How was your childhood? Do you have wonderful parents?
In terms of parents, when growing up, sometimes you feel that parents are a bit difficult or being hard on you, but it's only when you grow up that you realize. And also noting that I was born as an intersex person, something which is not publicly spoken about in our culture, and mostly it's swept under the carpet, so to say.
Okay.
Being born intersex is a secret, so you find that it was a bit of a challenge actually growing up.
Do you have siblings, brothers, sisters?
I actually have siblings, so I'm the firstborn in a family of 7.
In a family of 7. And what do your parents do?
So with my parents, so my mom is a businesswoman. With my father, he also does his own work, but for him, he's an economist. That was his line of study.
That's his profession.
Yes.
When you were born, at what point did they tell you there was something special about you? How far back do you remember?
I don't think there's ever been a time when they told me about my difference. So with my parents, what I noted was that we were treated equally as their children. There wasn't that distinction to say, no, you are a special child, or we need to treat you this way. The same way others were treated is the same way I was also treated. But in terms of realizing that I was different, you find that from a tender age. Because when you start playing with your friends, there's a time of discovery as a child, as you grow. And you start noticing that actually your friends are different from you. And especially that I was raised female. So I was expected to play with girls. But you find that there was
So let's get some clarity here. You said people who are intersex is because it is not very clear whether they are male or they are female. Now, for you, when you were born, what was pronounced to your parents? What did they think you were? What gender did they think you were?
So that's an interesting question. So in terms of pronouncement at birth, there was no pronouncement on my side. So what was done was actually, with intersex, doctors have got like an upper hand. So most we rely on what the doctors will say. But in my case, there was nothing which was actually said. So in terms of my parents, they were just told that they should just take me home, observe me as I grow.
And as you began to grow, you started developing a female genitalia because you said your parents raised you as a girl?
So not necessarily about developing female genitalia. So when you look at my condition, so it was unclear. So in short, we are saying that I had ambiguous genitalia which could not be categorized as either male or female. So in terms of being raised as a female, I took interest to ask my parents. And with the conversation I had with my father, I actually realized that there was a lot of wisdom, I would say, that actually went into it in terms of decision, in terms of which gender they would raise me with. So the gender that was actually chosen was female. So when I asked them to say, when I look at myself, honestly speaking, I think I align more on the male side. And even with my growing up, it's on the male side.
And this is the shock you had playing with the other children. You felt different. A girl playing with other children, and you realized you were different.
I was different, even how I would carry myself, even, with children, yeah? You find that they're toys, so there's expectation from society. If you're a girl, you should be playing with dolls, you should be doing those cooking things, which wasn't there for me. In as much as our parents made sure that we'd do any chore, but you find that I wanted more to actually do boys' stuff.
Now, I suppose we have to be very candid in this interview. As you were born with genitalia which was not clear, and your parents decided to raise you as a girl, were there other signs? Because for girls, it's not just the sexual private parts, but we develop breasts, we look a certain way. Is that what influenced your parents?
Not necessarily. So from the conversation, because earlier I talked about a conversation with my parents in terms of why was I raised, because I also had questions to say, why was I raised female? Even when I look at myself, the way I carried myself, it was so evident that I aligned myself with the male gender. So from what I got, and even when I do an analysis of it, it makes a lot of sense. When you look at our society today, you find that a girl child is more protected than a boy child. Today, if you see, let's say, for example, two children, 2 years of age, society will not tolerate to see a girl child walking without clothes, but they can actually tolerate a boy child. So that was also what they looked at, to say our child will be more protected if we raise them as female.
So your parents made that decision. And we can understand, I suppose, from your parents' point of view. Yourself, physically and mentally, you didn't feel like a girl. You didn't feel there were any female signs, and mentally, you didn't feel like a girl.
Exactly. Because that's how I would actually put it.
I saw on an interview, I think you did, or people were referring to an interview you did with the BBC online, and some people were talking, the people sounded confused, like, are you sure you're just not gay, you're just not homosexual? What does this mean? Is this real? What would you say to people like that?
So in terms of intersex people, it's a natural variation. It's a natural variation. So you find that some people, when we look at our culture, our traditions, in the past, they would actually think that it was a case. it was a bad
Witchcraft.
omen, it was as a result of witchcraft, it was maybe a punishment for the sins that the parents may have committed. But this is a natural occurring variation in human beings.
In other countries, before your 2 years, you'd probably have had an operation on a preferred sex assignment. In this case, if your parents wanted you to be a girl, you'd have had an operation before 2 years to assign that type of genitalia. You've had no operation at all?
So I've never had any operation at all. So in the work that we do as intersex activists, actually what we are advocating for is that no surgery should be done.
Why?
Because, so it's simple. So if we look at our context, for example, I'll give an example of Zambia, because this is the environment where we work in. So you find that if surgeries, for example, are done, it's based on a best guess. So they are not sure in terms of really what gender will this person align to. Because truth be told, when we are talking about intersex issues, we are talking about the sex of a person. And everything else actually follows after the sex. So you find that if an intersex person is born in a spectrum or in between male and female, so you find that there won't be that clear cut. Because remember, we've got just the binaries, male and female.
Female, yes.
Nothing in between. And this is where we have got confusions with people, because people don't understand that there's actually people who actually are born with sex characteristics which are not distinctly male or distinctly female. So coming back to your question in terms of why not surgeries, you find that what we've noticed also in our work, we find that surgeries are done, but follow-ups are not done in terms of making sure that this person is assisted to align with the gender. It's not like it's a short process, it's a long process, which requires like continuous management. And sometimes if a surgery is done, it means that that individual may have to be put on hormone therapy. And in most cases, that hormone therapy does not come cheap. If we look at the essential drugs being procured by Ministry of Health, you find that it's not even there. And most of the people who come to us are people who can't not even afford.
Well, when you talk about that, it raises another question. The orientation, community awareness, regulatory policy issues. Is this something that is in that space of government policy, intersex? I only heard about it when my producers told me you were coming to this program about people living with intersex. Of course, we've all heard about it. We've seen it in sports, especially. But very few people, I think, have ever heard of the term intersex. Is this something that Zambians, even in the realm of government, that people know about, talk about, are planning for, as far as you are concerned?
So in terms of the planning, maybe it's starting now. So what we've also done because I run an organization called INTERSEX Society of Zambia. So we've also done a legal and policy review in terms of how is it like growing up in the Zambian context, in the Zambian environment. So what is coming out, so in summary, I can say that our laws are blind to the existence of intersex people.
Blind. You're not recognized.
We are not even recognized. So even when we talk about policy, we are not included.
Okay. Now, you were raised as a girl, and you're very clear that you are a male. Have you thought about having surgery yourself and the whole follow-up process? I know you said it can't happen here, but are there opportunities for you to be able to do that even elsewhere?
So in terms of surgery, for me, it's not something I would consider, in as much as I fall on the extreme side when it comes to the variation, because in my case...
What does that mean? Explain to us.
So in my case, you find that when we talk about, I love to avoid issues around too heavy of terminology, but I think these are things that people would easily still get. So you find that when you talk about the sex garments, for example, because this is what actually determines whether, or I would say in terms of development, the sex garments will actually tell you whether you develop, they can either develop into ovaries or testicles. So you find that in my case, I'm actually stuck where I've got actually ovaries and testes, which is not expected in a male person, which is not expected
In a
a
female
female person.
Does that create any sort of chemical imbalance in you, in character, in the mental stability? How do you feel?
So in terms of feeling, from my end, I think from the time I can recall as a child, I aligned on the male gender, and that has not changed. I'm over 35, and that has not changed. So even in as much as I was raised female, for example, I had actually to have my names changed.
You had
My sex marker changed. So even when you talk about the sex marker, I'm being forced to choose between male and female. Yet, biologically speaking, I'm not male, I'm not female. So now I have to choose, of which, yes, because it's close to what I align
How
to
you
in terms
feel.
of the gender, but in terms of the sex, I still remain stuck. But I've chosen to align with the male sex. So in 2017, I actually went to High Court to have my names changed because my previous name was very feminine. Very feminine. And I also had to have my sex marker changed, my gender marker changed.
How was that process, that legal process? You were changing from that very feminine name to maybe a name now that is gender neutral to Mpatso. How was that court process for you? Was it easy?
No, it's not easy. I think, truth be told, it's not easy. Because we've talked about the laws being silent. So already there is no provision or laid down procedures on how an intersex person can actually have their gender marker, sex marker. In terms of the name, it's there because we do that by deed poll. So you find that that is not there. So even just to get someone to understand, to draft that document for me, it was a whole lot of 1 hour awareness and sensitization for that person to understand why I was changing my sex marker or why I was requesting to change my sex marker.
And you needed medical reports,
Before
support,
that,
and so on.
yes.
I see.
A lot of tests. It's not even one test, and those tests are not cheap. At some point, I even had to get a loan for me to actually get those tests done. After that, a report which you also actually
Take to the
take
courts.
to the courts and to the national registration card offices.
In Greek mythology, history, there is this common term, I think it's Hermaphrodites. That is individuals, human beings with fully developed male and female genitalia. Is that a term that can be applied to you?
So that term actually is what has also brought some level of confusion, I would say, because when you look at the word hermaphrodite, like you've actually pointed out, it's supposed to mean someone with fully developed male and female organs, which when you look at intersex issues, it's a spectrum. And if people like that existed, then it means others who fall outside of that definition, it means they will not be covered. But in the actual sense, when you talk about intersex people now, if you ask anybody on the streets and just do a quick spot check, you find that people will tell you that intersex people are those born with 2 organs. And that has also created another narrative where we are now hearing, oh, so intersex people should actually have 2 organs. And the most question we'll get is that which one is active? And for some of us will get confused. Because externally, we don't have what is expected for a female person to have externally.
Mpatso has just described how he was raised female, but he felt he aligned more with the male gender. After the break, he explains how hard it is for an intersex to have social relationships.
But tell me, socially, how is it for you? You say you have male genitalia fully developed and the other one not. How is it socially for you to just live your everyday life? Young men have girlfriends, boyfriends, and so on. How is it for you?
So it's actually tough. It's not an easy one because In as much as we can talk about external genitalia, but you find that it has, you find that in itself, for doctors to have failed to actually say this one is male or female, so it means that actually there was more to it. So it's socially, it's very difficult because you don't even know where to start from in terms of having to open up to that person you may have fallen in love with. So it's not an easy conversation, and sometimes there's a lot that actually goes on in your mind to say, if I open up, one, am I safe? Second, will this person run away from me?
Will they talk
Will
about
they
me?
talk
Will I be
about it openly?
stigmatized?
So it's a whole lot. And when you talk about thinking process, it's actually what wears people down the most. It's actually what wears people down the most.
You get depressed, anxiety.
Exactly. And when you get past that stage where you find someone who actually accept you for who you are and love you for who you are, you've got another step. What will the family say?
Oh my, oh my. Are you in a relationship yourself?
So currently, yes.
And you're in a place where you feel comfortable with that person?
Yes, I'm actually in a place where I feel comfortable, where I've also been welcomed by their kingsmen.
By their
So,
family.
Yes, I would say maybe finally I'm at a place or in a relationship where I've actually managed to actually see that acceptance from both my partner and as well as the family as well. But it's not easy.
It's been a long road. What about your own family? Now that you're an adult and you have identified as male, your mother still remembers this little girl she was raising. What are the dynamics with your family?
It was tough, in as much as they also tried to be strong, but I could see the struggle. Even just the time I changed, even the time I was actually sharing with them that I'm going to High Court to have my names changed, to have my gender marker, sex marker changed, I would see that there was some level of discomfort, worry,
Apprehension?
yes, to say, is this person actually doing the right thing? But what I appreciate is actually them telling me to say, we made a choice for you when you were young, but you're old enough to actually make choices. So for me, I said, oh, I'll pick it up, but each step of the way, I'll actually inform you. So the good part is that with the name that I have, it's not a name we had to look for. It was a name which was already given to me.
Okay.
So, but in terms even just adjusting because they were used to the previous name, because I never used this name, it was very difficult. And I said, okay, with time, in as much as I would hear instances where they will use my previous name, I said, a time will come when they'll adjust. And now I've
From
seen
the girly
that,
name to the unisex Mpatso.
and I've seen that adjustment. And I think the most difficult time in terms of the process of adjusting was also the time when I actually chose to have an interview with BBC. And the problem which they also made was that they didn't tell me that that interview had been published. Because when I just saw it and people were like, oh, what is this that you are doing? I'm like, what? What is this? What is it that you are trying to do? I'm like, I'm trying to raise awareness. It's not just
People are
me,
scared
actually.
of what they don't understand.
It's not just me. And the first thing that actually went through my head was like, oh, my parents. Let me just rush, because, with people asking, there's a lot of actually psychological impact which would have actually come to them if they were not actually ready, because it would have been like a point of surprise. Say, what are you talking about? But the first thing I did was to actually rush home
To explain.
to make sure that I explain that there's this actually which has been published and you should be ready for it.
We had a program on this podcast, a conversation with albinos, where their actual lives are threatened because people see them as different. Has there been any threat on your life since that interview? Do you feel safe physically, your personal safety?
So for me, it's feeling safe, I would say yes, and no at the same time, because I don't know what people's perceptions are. So the only thing I can do is actually make sure that I look out for my own safety. Because a lot of people, I don't know what thoughts are running in people's minds, and especially with a lot of issues around intersex. Because at times, I don't know, maybe someone out there is actually saying, oh, this is because this person may be a witch, or this person may have been bewitched, or this person is a case. And the moment you use those words, you wouldn't want to be close
But it's
to
a
someone
natural
who is a
phenomenon.
case.
Okay.
So in terms of safety, I just learned to make sure that I stay safe. And also I minimized socializing.
They're your parents, but what about your brothers and sisters? How is your relationship with them? How have they taken to you, so to speak?
So I would say the relationship is good. It has been a journey. It has been a process. Because the same way I actually tried to make my parents understand, because I went to extents of actually finding some information, videos, then I would give them. So that they see that they are not alone. They are not the only parents who've got a child who is intersex. So the same actually went with the way I interacted with my siblings. I made sure that just to explain, in as much as they may have seen that this person was, if anything, there wasn't that much difference, because some people were like, how was the experience being addressed as a female and being addressed as a male now? For me, there's no difference, because the same way I'm carrying myself now is the same. Even with the dress code, it was more inclined on the male side. So it was nothing really like changing, because even with my siblings, they saw that. Even with the dressing, it wasn't something surprising. At one point, actually, it was so surprising that there was a time I was actually trying on, because for me, my dress code before I changed was more like neutral. So there was a time I was actually trying on my mother's suit, and it was a skate. You should have seen the way our last born laughed at me, like, this is the way you look. No, you're not looking nice. I'm like, oh, okay. So that also told me something, to say there was a certain way actually even the youngest in our family was actually looking at me.
Did maybe your colleagues at work accuse you of maybe just trying to be gay?
So with the way I was growing up, it was not easy for someone to come to my face and say, you are this. Because I was so reserved, people didn't even know how I would react. And I'm one person who never tolerated any nonsense.
You protected your
I
space.
made sure that I protected my space. I only learned later when I came out as an intersex person, shared with everyone. So I only learned like from colleagues from school, where they were saying, oh, actually we thought that you are actually a lesbian. That's what people thought at school. I'm
You
like,
went to a
"Oh,
girls'
really?"
school?
So I went to an all-girls school. So from grade 8 up to grade 12, I was at Kablonga Girls.
My school.
I was at Kablonga Girls, actually.
Okay. How prevalent is this in Zambia? Have they told you any numbers? How prevalent are intersex people in our country? I know globally they say about 2% of the population. I believe in America, I think it's about 1 out of every 100 have some sort of intersex traits. Do you know how prevalent it is in our country?
It's very difficult, honestly, to know the prevalence of intersex births in our country, because first things first, we don't have data on intersex people. The only person where I would see that there was some sort of data collection was with the late Professor Chipeta, because for him, he actually kept track of the people whom he had attended to with differences in sex development or intersex. So that's where I just had like some idea of how many people would have actually worked with. So for him, I was saying, I think more than 200 plus. And now the only reference I can make is with the people we are working with, because currently we are working with about 67 to 69 intersex people.
In Lusaka only or nationwide?
So I would say, because we work nationwide, but in some places we have not even reached those places. So with the places where we've reached, like for example, Southern Province, Lusaka, Central Province, Copperbelt, and Northwestern.
About 67 people.
As well as Eastern Province, but it's just some parts. So we are working with about 67 to 69 intersex persons.
You shared you're in a relationship. How normal can it be? Would you get married? Would you have children? If you had decided to remain as a female, would you be able to give birth? How is it? What are the prospects for you?
So in terms of, let me ask this because it's about 3 questions. Yeah. So I'll start with the one which talks about whether, I'll generalize it, whether an intersex person can get married or not. So the answer is yes and no. So the same way, male and female persons, some can get married and some cannot. It's the same for intersex people. Because sometimes it's about preference, if that person wants to get married or if they don't want to get married. But the answer is they can actually get married and yeah, so that is that. So in terms of issues around can they have children, it's still the same response. The same way someone who is born biologically male or biologically female, some can have children and some cannot. It also applies to intersex people. So some can have, depending on your variation, and some can have.
Okay, now share with us some stories that have been maybe a bit shocking, the way people reacted to you, whether it's at work, at home, or even as you have been going out doing this orientation work. Any story, any incident that comes to mind?
So in terms of the work, I'll make reference to some of the cases which I've actually worked on, which for me still continue to pose some sort of questions to say how best can I actually assist these intersex people. I'll give an example of one, and that case, I think it's been the most like case where I had to actually, when you go to a family and you feel like, I don't even know, because you can't even show it to the family. And you can't show them to say there's no hope. You say, but how will I maneuver around this? So there was a case which was actually carried by Zanis for an intersex person based from the southern part of Zambia. And that one, for me, it was an extreme case because on top of that, that child was born with an open bladder. And one, it was very difficult because some of the questions actually which I had was, how will this person go to school if they start school? Not because they can't go to school, because they could walk, they can write, but you find that that bladder is open.
Yes.
So whenever urine is formed, it's just coming out. So it will mean that this person, you find that they have to change clothes. Most probably, I think the time we made that child, it's every 5 minutes. So which teacher is going to accept to actually be able to actually allow to have such a child in class?
And does this happen often with intersex people, that they have these real physical challenges around genitalia?
They do. So there are some, an example, especially where someone has got undescended testes. They experience a lot of pain during the cold season. That the pain is very unbearable. So there are actually physical challenges which they will actually faced, and most of them is actually abdominal
Problems.
pains.
You did mention it's very difficult to get access to drugs, but are you able to speak to somebody? Are you able to get even, psychological, psychiatric support, not psychiatric, but just somebody to speak to, counseling support, to say it's not an easy situation that many intersex people find themselves in?
So with the support in terms of psychosocial support, what we've done as an organization, we actually have that component because for us, we've identified that it's very important because that is what forms, I would say, a core in terms of what an intersex person will go through, because every time they need psychosocial support, even when it comes for them to go to school, dealing with family, dealing with just society. There's a whole lot of thinking process. So for us, taking care of the mental health is very important. So we've actually even partnered with some other organizations which are specifically providing specialized psychosocial support.
Do you get bullied at all by people saying maybe you don't really look like a boy, maybe you look don't really look like a girl. Do you get bullied at all?
With my personality, maybe behind my back, but not in my face.
I like
Maybe
that.
behind my
I
back.
like that. You work for the INTERSEX Association of Zambia. Tell us about that. What are your objectives? What are you trying to do?
So with the Intersex Society of Zambia, actually, in terms of why we exist, is to actually, our core reason why we exist is to actually facilitate for the recognition and also protection of the rights of intersex persons in Zambia. Because if you see that the laws are silent, it's very difficult to actually have policies which actually take into account the needs of this community. Because if the laws are silent, we'll continue to have intersex people actually suffering in silence, coupled with the issues around, in as much as Zambia is a Christian nation, for me, I question the Christianity that exists.
Because you feel you've been treated
Because-
badly?
Exactly. The church, for me, I don't expect that the church should be where I would experience some level of discrimination.
Share the experience. Share.
I think when it comes to the church, I stayed away from I was a very staunch Christian from childhood, and I loved to actually attend. We used to call them Bible quiz. I was so good. But there came a time when I started hearing, especially mothers, accusing me of all sorts of things. Because here I am, I was raised female. The attractions were towards females. So now, me being seen with a female without understanding my background raised a lot of issues. I stayed away from the church, I think, for more than 10 to 15 years, because I didn't feel that it was a space actually for me.
And have you gone back since?
I do, like once in a while, but not because I don't want to now, but because now I've known and I'm also able to actually share, to say if they see any difference in how I conduct myself. Now it's different, because I think it would have been more difficult if, for example, they say the way I'm looking and they say, oh, freedom, like, why are you calling this person like, oh, you are female, why are you behaving like this? It would have caused a lot of things. I think there's been a shift from the time that I changed my documents, because it was a struggle.
And
Be
you
it
feel
at the
and you feel more confident now to explain yourself that this is a natural phenomenon occurrence that you have.
Yes, I feel more comfortable because I've also have a backing which aligns with what I feel. Because I had to explain myself everywhere. And especially when I was growing up, I give someone my document, it's showing female, like, going to the bathroom was problematic. You're going to a female's bathroom and they tell you, no. These are not the bathrooms you're supposed to go to. Your bathrooms are that side. Talk about issues, struggles, even just at the airport with those scanners. I've had all those issues.
It's a daily struggle.
It's a daily struggle. So coming back to Intersex Zambia, it's mostly just to also make sure that we facilitate for the recognition of persons born with differences in sex development.
As we come to an end, if there's somebody listening to this conversation and they've just realized that, oh my God, there's help out there, I'm probably intersex, where can they find you?
So they can actually find us, our offices are in Avondale, and we also have a Facebook page where they can get all the contacts. If they're able to send us a message, we'll be able to also respond.
Intersex Association of Zambia Facebook page.
Intersex Society of Zambia.
Society of Zambia.
With the initials ISSZ. So we have got two. So we are trying to also just migrate from the previous one to the new one. So it's Intersex Society of Zambia with the initials ISSZ.
ISSZ.
Yes.
Mpatso, gift indeed. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you, and I wish you only the best in your life.
Thank you so much, and it was a pleasure to be part of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that is our conversation for today. I was talking to Mpatso, a very, very delightful young man, and he was talking about what it is to be intersex and living as an intersex in Zambia. It is clear that intersex is not a disorder, it's not a disease, it's not a condition, it is just a natural phenomenon where somebody is born with not fully developed both male and female genitalia. And in our country as Zambia, this is still an issue that we are grappling with at family level, at church level, as we heard from Mpatso, socially and in various sectors of society. But clearly, for somebody like Mpatso, they have to live with this every day and try and make the best for their lives. So please, if you do know somebody who is probably in the same situation, you can always reach out to the Intersex Society of Zambia. Thank you so much for having joined me on this podcast today. Good night.